2 weeks before the wedding, my fiancée invited me to a joint session with her therapist. There, I found out that she wanted a non-traditional marriage, where she could sleep with other men, but I wouldn't have the same rights. I silently listened to their well-rehearsed speech, then asked the therapist if she was licensed. When she said yes, I asked her to explain to my fiancé why the wedding was canceled. Then I simply walked out. 2 weeks before our wedding, she asked me to go to therapy with her. She had been seeing a therapist on her own for a while and wanted me to join her so we could discuss everything before the big day. To be completely honest with each other, it felt a bit odd to me. I thought we were already honest with each other. I mean, we were about to get married in 2 weeks. Plus, she had always been very private about her therapy sessions, barely mentioning them. I had never even met her therapist before, so the invitation felt off. The day came, and I went. Out of a sense of self-preservation, I left my phone on and recorded the session. My fiancé was already there, and I had to wait 20 minutes before they called me in. The therapist greeted me, shook my hand, and we exchanged pleasantries. Then she said something strange, something like, "You're not at all how she described you." I think she meant it as a compliment, but it put me on edge. She then looked at my fiancé and said, "This might be harder than we thought." That sent up a massive red flag, but I kept my cool. I just smiled, one of those dumb, awkward smiles you put on in uncomfortable situations. Then the therapist started talking. She gave a little speech, which I won't even bother repeating. Meanwhile, my fiancé took my hand while the therapist kept going about how we live in a modern world, and how my fiancé wanted our marriage to be unconventional. I smiled. I didn't fully grasp what the hell that meant. My first thought was that she wanted to discuss how she wouldn't be a submissive wife, how she wouldn't sacrifice her career, and so on. You know, modern woman, feminism, all that stuff. Nope. What she actually meant was that once we got married, she wanted to be able to sleep with other men. That was her modern marriage. But she still loved me very much, and could never handle me having the same privilege because it would hurt her too much to think about me being attracted to or taken away by another woman. I let them finish. They were so confident, probably because I hadn't reacted. Their confidence grew as they spoke, probably because they had rehearsed this conversation. Then I turned to the therapist and asked if she was licensed. Judging by her reaction, that was not the question she was expecting. She said yes. So I asked her to explain to my fiancé why we were no longer getting married and why, as of that moment, we were no longer a couple. I wished them luck and walked out. Now, I want to file a complaint against this therapist. I'm not sure if I should report her to the clinic or whatever regulatory board oversees therapists, but I don't think trying to ambush me into this bullshit was professional behavior. I want her to be held accountable for her lack of professionalism. That session left a bad taste in my mouth. Just to be clear, there was never going to be a positive outcome from that conversation. Even if my fiancé had suggested a fully open marriage where I could sleep with other women, my answer would have been the same. That's not a marriage. It's a joke. Looking back now, I'm starting to think she had already been cheating on me. Some things don't add up. I was an idiot. I listened to the recording again, and I still can't believe what I heard. Either way, the wedding is off. I'm a calm person. I don't argue, because I don't look for fights. I don't have conflicts or enemies because I live by principles and common sense. Maybe that gave my ex the false impression that she could walk all over me. If so, she was a fool for thinking that. After listening to the recording a few more times, I'm sure of one thing. The therapist realized that I wasn't at all how my fiancé had described me in their sessions. That's why she said, "This might be harder than we thought." Now, with the wedding canceled, people are asking questions. Questions I'm not comfortable answering. I'm sure my ex is trying to minimize the damage, but I have the recording. If she pushes too far, I won't hesitate to use it. Friends and family want answers, and I'm not sure what to tell them. I don't want them thinking I was a fool for letting my ex get so confident in manipulating me that she felt comfortable saying, straight to my face, that she wanted to sleep with other men. She's also been blowing up my phone, along with my best friends and my brothers, begging to fix things. I didn't understand what they were telling me in therapy. I'll do anything to make this right. It was the therapist's idea. I was against it. And so on. None of her screaming voicemails have gotten a response. We had also been preparing to take out a mortgage, but I canceled everything. I've essentially erased all financial and legal ties between us. Her latest excuse? That in therapy, she opened up about her insecurities regarding our sexual history. I had significantly more partners than she did, and the therapist suggested leveling the playing field. Whether that's true or not, that therapist needs to be held accountable. As soon as I figure out where to report this and what to say, I will. This post is mostly me sorting out my thoughts, but I also want to know, how would you handle the questions from friends and family? My ex is definitely working to control the narrative, and I don't want this turning into a he said, she said mess. I have the recording. Should I share it with people who are asking? She doesn't know I have it. Update 1. No more jokes. The past 2 weeks since my original post have been interesting. Last Monday, I spoke with a lawyer at work about the therapist situation. At first, he looked at me like I was insane and asked if I was joking. Naturally, I offered to let him listen to the recording. His response? Absolutely. Let's hear it. The next day, we spoke again. After going over the details, he pointed out something I hadn't even noticed in the recording. Every time the therapist spoke, she used we statements. We think, we want, we decided. Not once did she say, your fiancé asked me to discuss this with you, or your fiancé wants you to know this. It was always we. Then he asked me what my end goal was. Did I want to sue? He didn't think there was much of a case, and I agreed. I had no intention of taking legal action, but I did want to report her to the appropriate authorities. We decided to draft 2 letters, one to the clinic she works at, and one to the American Psychological Association. We checked. She's accredited. Meanwhile, more people at work found out about the situation. Someone did some digging and found online reviews about the therapist, plus contact info for 2 of her former patients. Turns out, she had some pretty bad reviews. Some people were very unhappy with her. We reached out to those 2 ex-patients through social media. Once we explained what was going on, they were more than happy to help. Their stories weren't any better than mine. The letters we prepared were thorough. They included formal complaints from the 2 ex-patients, my own account of how my ex had changed since starting therapy, a detailed breakdown of what happened in that session. Last Friday, I met with my parents. My ex's parents were there, too. My ex was also there, and she revealed more details, which we added to the report against the therapist. This week, we sent the letters. The clinic responded fast. They called my office Thursday morning, probably to verify whether this was a joke. Their lawyer got on the phone with us, and when we confirmed everything was real, we heard someone in the background mutter, "Oh, shit." They told us they were taking the complaint very seriously. One of my co-workers speculated that they might have received similar complaints about this therapist before, but this was the first time everything had been so well documented. We also mentioned in our letter that we were reporting this to the APA. That might have pressured them to act quickly. I don't know how this will end, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm done with this. However, after speaking with those 2 former patients, I really hope they investigate her. She seems unhinged and clearly has an agenda. She ruined their relationships, too. For reference, one of those patients was a woman. Now, about my ex and her parents. Last Friday, my parents called me and asked me to come over after work. When I arrived, surprise. My ex and her parents were there, too. My first instinct when I saw their car in the driveway was to turn around and leave. This conversation was supposed to happen on my terms, but she tried to take control. That wasn't happening. For the record, my ex was waiting for me outside. She looked amazing. If I had to introduce my parents to the perfect girlfriend, this would have been the look. She told me they were there to talk things over and try to fix things. By they, she meant her parents. Either she never told them the full story, or she gave them a version they didn't believe. She was holding a diary. She said she started writing it before therapy and continued until that very morning. She insisted that I needed to read her diary, that it would clear everything up. I told her this wasn't a book club. I wanted to go inside and get this circus over with, but she pleaded for 10 minutes alone before I talked to her parents. She handed me the diary again and started crying. Then my sister showed up. Then my ex's sister. They had been inside the house, but came out to see what was happening. In the end, I took the diary, walked inside, greeted everyone, and led my ex to the far end of my parents' garden, where there were benches among the trees. She quit her job. The stress was too much, and she had a nervous breakdown. Things kept spiraling, and nothing was getting better. She no longer sees that therapist. She started therapy for work-related stress, but somehow, every session turned into a conversation about our relationship. That was the therapist's only focus, because apparently, that was the only thing that interested her. She never told her parents why we broke up. Now, she's seeing a new therapist. I just listened. Then she shifted the conversation from herself to us. She said that from now on, I would have full control over our lives. I would manage our finances, have access to all her devices, track her location at all times, and any property we owned would be in my name. She said she would do anything to earn my trust again. Basically, the same thing she had been saying in her messages for the past couple of weeks. She listed even more points than I'm mentioning here. I don't understand why she thinks this would be a healthy life for either of us. I asked if she had ever cheated on me. She said she had the opportunity to, but she didn't. I believe her. But that answer pissed me off. What does she mean, had the opportunity? If you're in a committed relationship, you don't put yourself in situations where opportunities arise. You don't want the opportunity. It's like saying, I had the chance to kill someone today. Why? What the hell were you doing that gave you that chance? Why even phrase it that way, like it's some kind of accomplishment? At that point, our 10 minutes were up. I told her we should go talk to our parents. We walked back. I asked our sisters to leave us alone, since this wasn't their business. My sister protested a bit, but whatever. I explained everything, what happened in therapy, why I ended things, and where I stood. I didn't mention the recording because I didn't need to. My ex confirmed everything I said. That surprised me. Her father had tears in his eyes. That broke my heart. Her mother asked, "Is this really how you were raised?" and demanded an explanation. My ex repeated the same story. Stress from work, depression, a breakdown, therapy, a therapist who focused only on our relationship, a therapist who convinced her that I was the source of all her problems. The therapist pushed her on our intimate history, and my reaction is what snapped her out of it. She quit her job. She's looking for something less stressful, and she swore she would do anything to win me back. She started crying. She brought up the diary again. She said if I read it, everything would make sense, that she never truly supported the therapist's ideas. She only went along with it because the therapist was an authority figure, someone with experience. Our parents looked at me. I told them, personal diaries aren't the kind of literature I read. Unless the author is a dead poet. Big mistake. I meant to imply that personal diaries only become literature when their authors are writers or historical figures, and they're usually published posthumously. I also hoped they would understand my real point. I don't want to read it because it won't change anything. But what's said is said. Everyone looked at me like I had just wished death upon my ex. The whole room went tense. So I sighed and said, fine, I'll read it. Sometimes, the wrong words can ruin everything. Now, about her new therapist. She showed her parents' emails confirming her sessions. This therapist is an old guy with a white beard. Looks like Freud. I Googled him. He's married, speaks at conferences, and has written a few books, which are available on Amazon. Seems like a legitimate professional. Then her parents hit me with, "You kids can work this out." That was the second thing that pissed me off that day. Like this was all just some game. Like we were just kids who needed adults to step in and tell us what to do. As if we weren't mature enough to decide for ourselves what counts as betrayal, what crosses the line past which there's no coming back. We're just kids, and we need to work things out. I managed to recover some ground after my Dead Poets Society remark, and with that, the day came to an end. We've known each other for 9 years, 5 of which we spent as a couple. Even if her actions had justifiable reasons, how do you come back from this? This isn't just a reset. My entire perception of her has fundamentally changed. She feels like a stranger. I do still find her attractive, very attractive. How she looked last Friday was stunning. That's undeniable. But that was part of the plan. The hairstyle I love. The dress I bought for her. The shoes I like most. The light scent of the perfume I gifted her. All of it, calculated. The diary is on my nightstand. I haven't read it. I probably never will. I did check it to see if it was actually a year old, and it is. The way the pages are folded, the way the ink on the first entries has visibly aged, the gradual way she filled the pages, it all checks out. The pen she used was clipped to the diary, and when I tested it, the ink level was consistent with a year's worth of use. It's not fake, but I still see no reason to read it. I won't let it be a tool for manipulation. I don't think that was her original intent a year ago when she started writing it. If she's telling the truth, her new therapist suggested she share it with me. As for what I tell people asking why the wedding was canceled, I keep it simple. We had serious disagreements we couldn't resolve. That's it. But if her sister finds out the truth, which is likely, since she's very close with their mother, then everyone will know the real reason. Our parents want us to meet again next week. They told me I should read the diary. Maybe it'll help. Maybe you can fix things. Start fresh. You have such a long history together. She'll go through therapy. She'll get better. She's still the woman you fell in love with. She's just not well right now. You still love her. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so dramatic about all this. That's what they say. Not me. I don't think I'll see them next Friday. But goddamn, she looked amazing. I want to thank everyone for the support and advice. It really helped me navigate the situation with the therapist. Now, about the diary. Should I return it? Keep it? Read it in 90 years? Drop your answers in the comments. Update 2. Let's start with the therapist. She no longer works at the clinic. The main reason? A lawsuit was filed against the clinic. Not by me. Someone else, completely unrelated to my situation, sued them. I don't have details, but I suspect she found out about my report and wanted to reach out to me for more information. She tried to contact me repeatedly, but I never responded. She's blocked, and if she sent any requests, they've been ignored. A small voice in the back of my mind keeps whispering that maybe writing that report wasn't the smartest decision. It might attract unwanted attention from the people behind the lawsuit. They might reach out to me for help, which could drag me into something bigger than I intended. But despite all that, I still can't stop smiling, knowing that the therapist is in trouble. For those who doubted whether I had emotions, if this isn't enough proof for you, I don't know what is. And yes, that was sarcasm. Now, about Mela. It's complicated. I decided to return the diary, and I did it in the most formal way possible. A courier from my workplace delivered it to her Monday morning. I also included a letter explaining why I didn't read it. It boiled down to this. She never took responsibility for the situation. By giving me the diary, she was just shifting the responsibility, expecting me to find the answers instead of her owning up to everything. So, I shifted it right back. To be honest, the moment I got confirmation that the diary had been returned, I felt a pang of regret. Maybe I should have read it. Later that day, Mela showed up at my workplace. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't demand anything. She simply waited in the reception area for me to finish work. Her plan? To wait. To talk. Naturally, I found out she was there very quickly. I had two choices. Tell security to remove her. Talk to her. I chose to talk. We went over the factors that led to our downfall. The first? Stress. I knew she struggled with stress, but I had no idea how bad it really was. Looking back, when she first started seeking therapy for work-related stress, I should have paid more attention, but she always insisted she was fine. So why shouldn't I believe her? Despite everything that happened in therapy, she did have a nervous breakdown at work, one that she hid from me and her family. The second reason, I could have been a father. She had a miscarriage. She found out she was pregnant a few weeks in and planned to tell me in a special way. But a few days later, she started bleeding. And that was the end of it. She never told me. Because she was afraid. She knew how much I wanted to be a father and convinced herself that I'd see her as unworthy. That I'd think she wasn't capable of carrying a child. That idea is completely ridiculous. The third reason, friends. I've never hidden the fact that we have friends in open relationships. One of them, a woman, reached out to Mela almost a year ago and invited her to lunch. And then, right away, she unloaded all of her frustrations about her failed marriage onto Mela. Her husband and I had something in common. Both of us had been with far more people than our partners. For me, that number is 26. For her husband, 70. The moment they got married, he demanded an open relationship. And since then, she's been miserable. According to her, Mayla was headed for the same fate if she wasn't careful with me. She told Mayla that I was already showing the same signs her husband did before their wedding. The fourth reason: the people we love aren't always who they seem. Our fathers. Both of them work in academia and have known each other for 30 to 35 years. They frequently attend work events and social gatherings, usually with their wives. I met Mayla at one of these events. I had gone with my father because I wanted to network with a professor who could help my career. Mayla had replaced her mother at the event because of a scheduling conflict. At least, that's what she was told. Turns out, her parents were going through a major crisis at the time. Because of her father's infidelity, she only found out recently, when she talked to her mother about her fears, which had been triggered by what that friend had said. It shattered her. Her parents had always seemed like the perfect couple, a model marriage. And yet, they managed to bury the problem and maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage all these years. The four horsemen of the apocalypse. Add to them a therapist with a suspicious agenda, and you have a recipe for disaster. The therapist was enthusiastically planning my open marriage. She confirmed everything that friend had planted in Mayla's head. Men like me are never satisfied with one woman. Eventually, I would start looking for others. And there was only one way to fix my inevitable cheating. Mayla had to sleep with other men, at least until our numbers were equal. Of course, I would resist, but that was normal. If I truly loved her, I would understand. It was a multi-layered plan. It was meant to fix my future behavior, prove my love, and strengthen our relationship. Obviously, it was doomed to fail. But now I believe that was the goal. The therapist never intended for us to survive this. What the therapist didn't expect, what the therapist didn't foresee was how quickly I would react. For the entire week, Mayla and I met every day. She answered every question I had. One thing was clear. While I had been ready to walk away, she was ready to fight for us until the very end if there was even a chance of saving our relationship. By the end of the week, I had to leave for a work trip in another city. I was gone for a month. Originally, the trip was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it was extended for another 2, more work hours, better pay. Before I left, I gave Mayla a copy of the therapy session recording. She already knew I had it. I mentioned it the first time she showed up at my workplace that Monday. Listening to the recording shook her to her core. Her memory of the session was completely different from what was actually said. It seemed like she finally understood why I had reacted the way I did. At home, everyone knew about my trip, and for 3 weeks, I was completely left alone. Minimal interference. It was wonderful. A few people in the comments had suggested grabbing a beer with me if I ever ended up in their city. I actually accepted one of those invitations. For the first time, I met an online friend in real life. To my surprise, he wasn't some weird guy. He and his wife turned out to be great people. Week 4, Mayla came to see me. We had stayed in touch over the past 3 weeks, discussing different things, but always about us. One big problem still needed to be solved: the France dilemma. After our wedding, we were supposed to go to France for 2 weeks, a sort of delayed honeymoon. We hadn't been able to afford it right after the wedding, so we had planned the trip for 3 months later, and it was coming up fast. We had non-refundable plane tickets, hotel reservations. What we didn't have was, well, us. So we talked, and we agreed. We were still going to France. As friends. I can already see some of you rolling your eyes at that sentence. France was incredible. Visiting a country like that makes you realize just how medieval the US feels in comparison. The moment you step into a museum, you immediately recognize the Americans. Honestly, a mandatory How to Behave Abroad course should be required in our schools. We came back from France as a couple, and no, it wasn't because of the magic of Paris. We're not back to where we were before. There's a lot to rebuild, but we agreed on a few things. She's looking for a new, less stressful job. Our friends in open relationships? Considered toxic, we're cutting ties. We both love the name Mayla. Our first daughter will have that name. Thanks, France. You should never hide something like a miscarriage from your partner. I'm still furious about that. We're getting a puppy. And a kitten. She'll continue seeing her current therapist for a while. When we do get married, it'll be for us. Small ceremony, just close family. Next country? Probably Italy. I assume this isn't the dramatic update some of you were hoping for. A lot of people asked for a continuation, and if you were expecting rage, revenge, or chaos, I'm sure there's a version of this story where that happens. But, as I've said from the beginning, I never hated Mela. My actions were self-defense at the time. Her actions made it seem like she wanted something that completely contradicted what I thought we had agreed on. For those worried about her mental state, there's no need. As soon as the fog of her therapist's influence cleared, she more or less returned to herself. You can't go through something like this and stay unchanged. But things will be okay. Final thoughts. You probably remember how she offered me complete control over our finances, access to all her devices and location at all times. At the time, I had zero interest in that kind of life. It was just her desperate attempt to keep the discussion going, to avoid being cut off completely. We agreed that we should be open about access to our devices. But funnily enough, we always had been. So nothing actually changed. As for finances, we're continuing what we've always done, splitting things equally. A final thank you to everyone who gave me valuable advice. I'm endlessly grateful. Writing these posts has been a form of therapy in itself, and a great way to process everything.